On the last couple days of my trip to El Salvador, I finally got to take some time off reporting and just relax with my family. One of the first things we did was take a tour of the house that my parents built in their hometown, San Miguel.
¿Esto qué era?
Esta es la propiedad de mi mamá.
Ah, ya.
Sí, es mi cuarto. Le mandamos a arreglar este baño porque lo tenía con cortinas de tela.
The plot of land that this house is built on was bought by my great-grandmother almost 100 years ago. It's the land where my grandmother was born, then my mom, and my sisters too. Where there was once only a wooden shack on dirt, my parents built a 5-bedroom house with concrete walls and ceramic tile floors.
Y en el piso, ¿te gusta el piso?
Yeah, it's nice. It's tile?
Puro tile todo.
It's not the Taj Mahal, but it's nice, comfortable, and homey. And it's nice to see my mom so happy and excited. And while my mom is really happy to be retired, my dad's happy too, but for very different reasons.
Pero ¿y cómo subieron eso ahí arriba? Una grúa. Con una grúa.
So here I am in the famous El Hangar, my mom and dad's restaurant that they opened next to their house in San Miguel. It's hard to describe. Behind the house, my dad has constructed a giant, and I mean giant, dance hall/restaurant. He named it El Hangar, the hangar, and made the whole place airplane-themed for reasons unknown. And on top of this restaurant is a life-sized single-seater metal plane that my dad welded out of scrap metal. And my dad will proudly tell everyone that you can see it from space, which is not true, but you can see it on Google Maps. From Google Maps view, you can look down and see the plane that is on top of my dad's restaurant, El Hangar. The plane is painted bright yellow with a red racing stripe down the sides. And when I asked him how he got it on the roof, he told me he paid a crane to come and lift it onto the building. On the side of the plane is a sticker with the cover art for the last show that I made, Princess of South Beach. Which, if you need a palate cleanser from this show, that's a good bet. I have to say, I never thought this day would come. My whole life, my parents told us that when they retired, they wanted to go live in El Salvador. That they wanted to live out their old age in the place that they still thought of as home. My dad has dreamed of opening this restaurant and getting to MC karaoke nights here his entire life. But that just never really seemed like a possibility. It was dangerous to open a business here. You didn't know how much trouble the gangs were going to give you if they let you do it at all. But in 2021, after spending their whole lives working in the US, my parents finally felt confident enough to do it. And there's one person who my mom credits with making that happen.
Es Bukele. Su mundo era ciego hasta encontrarlo a él. De rodillas le ruega que se reelija. Puta, estoy cabrón, ¿verdad?
President Nayib Bukele. My dad loves to tease my mom about how much she loves him. In 2019, Nayib Bukele became president of El Salvador. And the sole focus of his administration was getting rid of the gangs, to make El Salvador a safe place to live. And in large part, he has done that. There is finally peace in El Salvador. But the price for that peace has been very, very steep. I'm Jasmine Romero, and this is Sacred Scandal: Nation of Saints, Episode 10, The Future. On a hot summer morning in 2019, a then 37-year-old Nayib Bukele walks across the steps of the National Palace in San Salvador. It's across the plaza from La Catedral, the cathedral where Oscar Romero's funeral was held. And just like that day almost 40 years ago, the plaza is filled with Salvadorans. But this time, they're not crying tears of mourning. They're openly weeping with tears of joy. Bukele has a thick black beard and slicked back hair. He stands smiling before his adoring crowd, and he's wrapped in a blue and white sash that's emblazoned with the crest of the Salvadoran flag. This young man has just become the first person to win the Salvadoran presidency as part of a new party, Nuevas Ideas, New Ideas. And this party, it's important for a lot of reasons, but mainly because it's considered an alternative to the two parties that have been in power since the end of the war. The FMLN and Arena have taken turns running the government since 1992, and both sides have been charged with corruption. Presidents from both parties have been convicted of embezzling millions of dollars, all while the country plunged further and further into gang-controlled violence. And so in many ways, Bukele's rise is seen as a rejection of the politics of the war and an embrace of a newer, more relevant kind of politics. So on this sunny day, Bukele steps up to the mic, like a preacher on the pulpit, to address the nation.
Nuestro país es como un niño enfermo. Nos toca ahora a todos cuidarlo. Nos toca ahora a todos tomar un poco de medicina amarga. Nos toca ahora a todos sufrir un poco. Nos toca ahora a todos tener un poco de dolor, asumir nuestra responsabilidad y todos como hermanos sacar adelante a ese niño que es nuestra familia, es nuestro país, es El Salvador.
He tells the crowd, our country is like a sick child, and it's up to all of us to take care of it. Even if that means drinking medicina amarga, bitter medicine. But the crowd doesn't flinch. They love him, and it's clear to see why. He's a young man with an excellent smile and a ton of charisma.
Nadie se interpondrá entre Dios y su pueblo para poder cambiar El Salvador. Muchas gracias. Que Dios bendiga El Salvador. Que Dios bendiga el nuevo gobierno y que Dios bendiga a uno y cada uno de los salvadoreños.
When coming into office, Bukele's big promise to the people of El Salvador was to get rid of the gangs. MS-13 and Barrio 18. Gangs that had terrorized the population for decades and given the country the title of murder capital of the world. But to get rid of those gangs, Bukele needed money. Lots of it. Within 6 months of taking office, Bukele asked the Legislative Assembly, the Salvadoran Congress, to pass a $200 million spending bill to pay for El Plan Control Territorial, his plan to combat the gangs. But there was a lot of questions about exactly how that money would be used. Bukele's administration claimed that he couldn't reveal that information because the plans were all top secret. And when he couldn't provide answers for how he would spend the money, the Legislative Assembly signaled that they wouldn't pass the bill, which really pissed Bukele off.
Si estos sinvergüenzas no aprueban esta semana el Plan Control Territorial, nos volvemos a convocar aquí el domingo, le volvemos a pedir sabiduría a Dios y le decimos, Dios, tú me pediste paciencia, pero estos sinvergüenzas no quieren trabajar para el pueblo.
Bukele claimed that this was all a game of dirty politics, that the members of the assembly were just working against him because he wasn't part of their political parties, Arena and the FMLN. He told the Legislative Assembly, you have until this weekend to get me the money, or else. And by the weekend, the world got a taste of the bitter medicine that Bukele had promised.
The country's soldiers entered the building while President Nayib was about to address lawmakers. The soldiers were armed with automatic weapons. The reason for such action was to step up the pressure on lawmakers to force them to back a proposed plan to fight crime.
On February 9th, 2020, Bukele stormed the assembly building with 40 armed soldiers behind him to preside over the voting and ensure that his bill passed. It was a move straight out of an authoritarian textbook. And it made headlines around the world, condemning this action as anti-democratic.
José Miguel Vivanco, director de Human Rights Watch para las Américas, opinó y cito que tal exhibición de fuerza bruta justifica una reunión urgente de la Organización de los Estados Americanos.
No estoy de acuerdo con la militarización que se hizo. En ningún momento esperamos que esto iba a pasar. Nos sentimos incómodos porque venimos de buena fe a tratar de ayudar al gobierno.
Estamos protestando enérgicamente por esa actitud por la cual se ingresó a este recinto legislativo.
But in El Salvador, it drew cheering crowds. It was seen as a power move by someone who was finally willing to do whatever it takes to get rid of the gangs. Bukele even leaned into the international fame, changing his Twitter bio to, quote, the world's coolest dictator. In the end, Bukele got the money that he needed, and he got to work executing his grand vision for El Salvador, one that included a lot of big, flashy projects. He invested in the now famous Surf City, an entire beach town sponsored by the government to promote El Salvador as a global surf destination. And in perhaps the flashiest and most confusing move, Bukele made Bitcoin one of the official legal currencies in El Salvador.
Queda aprobada la ley de Bitcoin.
Lawmakers in El Salvador broke into applause after voting to approve Bitcoin as legal tender on Wednesday, making the Central American country the first in the world to fully adopt the cryptocurrency.
And while these things might sound a little outlandish, for Salvadorans, it was really a breath of fresh air. For once, the world was hearing a story about us that wasn't about gangs or death and destruction. It was something good, or at least it was something different. Plus, Bukele might be a little eccentric, but his plans seem to be working. Within the first 2 years of his presidency, the murder rate dropped by 52%. To be fair, the murder rate had already been on the decline since its high in 2015. But still, even for people living in the US, people like my parents, the progress Bukele was making was clear.
Él siempre quiso regresar, desde antes de que estuviera el país mejor. Pero yo siempre le decía que no, porque no lo veía conveniente, porque yo no quería que viniéramos a arriesgar nuestra vida y a estar lidiando con las maras.
My parents had always wanted to come back to El Salvador. And while my dad was a little more cavalier about the threat of gang violence, my mom was more fearful. She worried about being extorted or threatened. But with the progress that Bukele was making, my mom finally felt confident enough to sell their home in the United States. And in 2021, they moved to San Miguel permanently, to the house that they had spent a lifetime building. 2021 is also the year that Bukele's party, Nuevas Ideas, overwhelmingly won seats in the Legislative Assembly. And that Legislative Assembly promptly voted to oust 5 sitting Supreme Court justices and basically gut the entire judicial branch of the government. In doing so, cases across the country were dropped in an instant, including one seeking justice for the victims of El Mozote. But again, this move drew cheers from many, as Bukele insisted that these were necessary steps to weed out corruption and fight the gangs. With the murder rate under control and the country rapidly drawing more Bitcoin and surf tourists, it seemed like Bukele could do no wrong. That is, until the weekend of March 27th of 2022.
Tonight, El Salvador is under state of emergency after a deadly weekend of gang violence. The National Civil Police reporting 14 people murdered on Friday and 62 the following day, making Saturday one of the deadliest days in 30 years.
Over 2,000 arrests made in just 4 days in response to one of the bloodiest weekends in the country in 30 years. The National Civil Police reporting 62 homicides on Saturday alone.
All over the country, there were reports of murders. And not gang shootouts. Seemingly random murders. In the span of a weekend, 87 people were killed in El Salvador. One body was even hauntingly laid out on the road to Bukele's Surf City. After the break, the message behind these murders.
Tonight, El Salvador is under state of emergency after a deadly weekend of gang violence.
After all the progress made, it really felt like a slap in the face for Salvadorans to have the deadliest weekend on record in more than a century. These murders were of seemingly innocent civilians, and all the reports signaled that they were carried out by gang members. Gangs that President Bukele claimed to have under control. The murders seemed to be a direct message aimed at the president himself. News that he did not take lightly.
La Asamblea Legislativa de El Salvador aprobó el domingo la solicitud del presidente Nayib Bukele para establecer un régimen de excepción ante una oleada de homicidios que aqueja al país.
Queda aprobado el proyecto de decreto que contiene régimen de excepción.
In an emergency session of the Legislative Assembly, Bukele called for un estado de excepción, a state of exception. What Bukele was asking for was an immediate suspension of civil liberties, ones guaranteed in the Constitution, so that he could declare all-out war on the gangs. And with his party controlling the judicial and legislative branches, the state of exception easily passed. Within that state of exception, the government could now arrest anyone for any reason. There would be no presumption of innocence, no need for warrants, and no guarantee for when you'd be released. Agents of the state could come and pick you up on the mere suspicion that you were a gang member. Bukele also approved the use of deadly force for officers of the state. Overnight, billboards went up across the country, showing the number for tip lines, where you could anonymously report anyone who you thought might be in a gang or affiliated with one. I even saw a couple on my trip.
On the highway, there was a sign listed, or I guess like a billboard over the highway that said, "With your tax dollars, we keep fighting the gangs." And there was a phone number, and it said, "Declare your rent," meaning the rent that people paid monthly to the gangs to keep them from bothering them.
But it wasn't just gang members that they were after. It was anyone who could be affiliated with the gangs. You could be arrested for being a collaborator, someone suspected of giving the gangs information or money, or of hiding a gang member. Within days of the state of exception being declared, the Bukele administration sent the police and military out to conduct massive raids. Thousands of people were rounded up and sent to processing centers. Children as young as 12 were sent into overcrowded prison cells to await processing in the now backlogged judicial system. Between March and December of 2022, over 60,000 people were detained by Bukele's administration.
And to hold all of these arrested people, Bukele approved the building of a mega prison with a capacity for 40,000 people, one of the largest in the world.
The terrorism confinement center can fit up to 40,000 inmates and is considered to be the largest jail in the Americas.
The president announced he was moving thousands of high-ranking gang members to the country's new so-called mega jail.
It looks like a sea of skin and tattoos. These images released by El Salvador's government shows the transfer of about 2,000 inmates.
Human rights groups around the globe criticized these actions, saying that the roundups were excessive, that many of those detained and arrested had no verifiable connection with the gangs, that Bukele and his government were using the state of exception to arrest and threaten those who opposed his regime, including environmental activists, journalists, and academics in opposition to the administration, and that abuses and death were happening within the prison system. But still, the Salvadoran people supported the president. All over social media, Salvadorans snapped back at the president's critics.
How can you be worried about criminals' human rights? They didn't care about our human rights when they killed us.
Anyone who criticizes the government is for the gangs and should be arrested.
If some innocent people have to suffer to get rid of the gangs, it's worth it.
It feels weird to say this, but on a certain level, I get it. Looking across the last 40 years at how much the Salvadoran people have suffered, what price wouldn't they be willing to pay for peace? For a chance that their children could grow up in safety? And anyway, it was the gangs who provoked him, right? They're the ones who killed almost 100 people in a weekend. Well, as it turns out,
Yo al viejo lo saqué de adentro, brother, en una forma de ayudarles a todos y de demostrarles mi lealtad y confianza. Pues yo mismo lo fui a traer allá y yo mismo lo fui a Guatemala.
What you're hearing is a conversation between a senior member of the Bukele administration and a leader of MS-13. Remember in 2021 when the murder rate dropped by 50%? Well, as it turns out, that's because Bukele had a pact with the gangs. Based on reporting by the Salvadoran news outlet El Faro, in exchange for lowering the murder rate, the Bukele administration agreed to give preferential treatment to high-ranking gang members in prison. That's what this conversation we're listening to is about.
Entonces, pero yo no sé por qué se confían en otra gente, brother.
In the recording, a Bukele official is talking to a gang leader and telling them how much their administration has done to show them its loyalty and good faith. And he even admits to personally escorting a gang leader named El Kruk from his prison cell in El Salvador across the border to freedom in Guatemala. It was the breakdown of these negotiations that led to the spike in murders during that deadly weekend in March of 2022. The reactions to this news from the public have varied. Some of Bukele's supporters say that the news is fake, that El Faro is simply against the president and working in service of the gangs. Others say that the president was justified in doing whatever he needed to do to get rid of the gangs, even if that includes these kinds of negotiations. Either way, the reports of these negotiations didn't affect the president's approval ratings, which are currently around 92%. In September of 2022, as Bukele was nearing the end of his term as president, he decided to address the country for a special announcement. The venue stood in stark contrast to the sunny morning when he took office. Instead of the open steps of the National Palace, the announcement took place in a darkened conference room well into the night. In place of the adoring crowds, a small group of well-dressed officials and foreign dignitaries stood clapping, welcoming Bukele to take his place at the dais. Behind the president, is a towering portrait of a man dressed in white robes with a cross necklace draped across his chest. It's a portrait of a man with some seriously enviable eyebrows, whose face carries the weight of the entire Salvadoran people. The man, of course, is Oscar Romero, who was named a saint in 2018. President Bukele steps in front of the portrait of Oscar Romero and proceeds to tell the audience that he plans to run for president once again.
Es por eso que luego de conversarlo con mi esposa Gabriela y con mi familia, anuncio al pueblo salvadoreño que he decidido correr como candidato a la presidencia de la República.
The audience claps. No one is surprised, despite the fact that this move goes directly against the Constitution of El Salvador. According to that constitution, no president is allowed to remain in office for 2 consecutive terms. To run again is the equivalent of an American president running for a 3rd time. But Bukele doesn't care. With the support of so much of the Salvadoran population behind him, he knows that this rule doesn't apply to him. And he's right. The unconstitutionality won't matter. And in February of 2024, Bukele easily wins his 2nd term. With his win, he controls all 3 branches of government, and as such, all the power in El Salvador. Outside, a full military guard stands at attention. Since implementing the state of exception, almost 90,000 people have been arrested in El Salvador. At least 240 people have died in police custody. And while the murder rate is now one of the lowest in the world, reports of disappearances are up. And it's hard to get a solid number on exactly how many, because Bukele's administration has changed the way it counts disappearances. But human rights organizations say that there are over 28,000 cases of disappearances currently open in El Salvador. After making this series and seeing how much death and destruction came from the hands of the government, Bukele's rise is really scary to me. Salvadoran history is full of governments using order as a justification for horrendous acts of violence. There are always innocent people who are collateral damage, whether they're peasants or priests or student activists or my tia Margarita. I went on this journey to understand my family and our history. And over the course of the last 2 years, I've realized that our story isn't just ours. It's the story of a country and a history that's too easy to repeat. Seeing the military on our streets, searching people at bus stops, arresting people with impunity, it all just looks like the start of the same cycle over again. But my mom, she sees it differently.
Pues toda mi vida tengo 63 años y yo nunca había votado por nadie, ni por alcaldes, ni por presidentes, porque no creía. Pero al fin puse mis esperanzas en alguien que nos prometió y nos está cumpliendo, y es Nayib Bukele.
My mom had never voted in a Salvadoran election before 2019. Since she left the country as a teenager, she's watched government after government come in and fail to protect its own people. First, the death squads and the war, and then the gangs. After spending a lifetime waiting for El Salvador to be safe, the fact that Bukele has made the country livable for her is enough to win her love and support.
¿Y qué es lo grande que ha hecho Nayib Bukele?
Pues sobre todo darnos mucha seguridad. Nos sentimos ahora Seguros ahorita me siento como cuando tenía quizás 8 o 10 años en los que no teníamos miedo de salir a la calle.
In a world where you have to choose between freedom and safety, safety wins every time. El Salvador now holds the title for the country with the highest incarceration rate per capita in the world. And Bukele's approval rating has never been higher. My mom is part of the 92% of Salvadorans who say they approve of the president's actions. On one of my last days in El Salvador, my parents decided that we should take a trip to a nearby beach, El Cuco. It's about a 30-minute drive away from my parents' house. My mom called up my tia Vilma to see if she wanted to come too. And she said yes, but only if she could bring along my little cousin, Angel Joaquin. He's 7, and he rarely gets a chance to go to the beach. Angel Joaquin's mother, my cousin Carmen, is in prison for being in a gang. His father is too. Back when my tia Margarita died, my tia Vilma took in her kids. And now she's raising a new generation of kids left behind, including Angel Joaquin. We all pile into my dad's pickup truck and head off to El Cuco. I remember trips like this when I was a kid. Every time we came to visit, we had to go to El Cuco and eat some fresh fish and play in the warm ocean water. The beach is different now. There are more resorts, and the streets are better paved. But it's still full of old men coming in with the catch of the day, and little brown children playing in the sand.
It's 1:19 in the afternoon, and I'm at El Cuco, Playa El Cuco, which is the closest beach to my family's house in San Miguel. It was about a 40-minute drive, and I'm here with my aunts and my cousin. And the beach is beautiful. The water is like bath water. You keep walking and walking, and it doesn't pass your knees. It's amazing.
As we walk down the beach, I notice a pickup truck that's driving down along the water. The truck parks, and 4 men hop out of the back. Well, this is surprising. 4 guys and 4 soldiers in full fatigues and rifles just strolling down the beach. The soldiers are wearing helmets, boots, and carrying what look like M16 rifles. As they walk past us, I can see that they're inspecting us. They linger for a moment, but then they continue to walk down the beach. Their boots leave heavy footprints in the sand. As of this recording, the state of exception in El Salvador has been renewed 26 times. There is no timeline for when civil liberties will be reestablished. And until the state of exception is dropped, El Salvador will in essence be a police state, one where there is safety, but not freedom. After a good meal of pescado con chirmol and some time laying in the hammock, it's time to go. As the sun starts to set, we start packing up to make the drive back to San Miguel. But before we go, I decide to take one last dip in the water. And I ask my little cousin, Angel Joaquin, if he wants to come too. He smiles a big, gap-toothed grin and takes off running for the water. I catch up to him and hold his hand as we run towards the water. I watch his little feet pound the sand as he dives headfirst into the waves. In another lifetime, this boy might have been conscripted into the army or into the guerrilla. He might have left his family to travel north and cross a river, or stayed home and become a marero, a foot soldier in a street gang. These pathways are still possible. But for now, he can be what he is, a little boy, enjoying a day in the sun with his cousin from the States. I don't know what the future will bring for El Salvador, how long Bukele will be in office. I don't know what Angel Joaquin's future will be. But at least for now, there is a future to dream of. There is hope for what this boy might become, for what this place might become.
And Angel Joaquin is having a good time. ¡Te agarró! ¡Te agarró la ola!
If you're interested in learning more about Bukele and the current state of El Salvador, I highly recommend you check out the podcast Bukele, El Señor de los Sueños, from Radio Ambulante Studios, and Humo, Murder and Silence in El Salvador, from Sonoro. If you've enjoyed our show, please leave us a rating and review in the podcast listening app of your choice, and send the show to someone you think would enjoy it. We'll be back next week in a special conversation with one of the people who sent me on this journey, Salvadoran-American comedian Marcela Argüello. Sacred Scandal, Nation of Saints is a production of AHA Podcasts in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted and written by me, Jasmine Romero. Produced by Jasmine Romero with help from Alvaro Céspedes. Research and reporting by Jasmine Romero. Edited by Zaire Quevedo. Nation of Saints was recorded in New York City at the Relic Room with engineering by Sam Baer. Mixing and sound design by Pachi Quiñones. Original music by Golden Minds, Darko and Aime, based on Patrick Hart's original composition. Fact-checking by Erendira Aquino Ayala. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Isaac Lee, Rose Reed, and Nando Villa. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. Sacred Scandal was created by Melanie Bartley and Paula Barros. For more podcasts, go to the iHeartRadio app or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts.